All right, so we're talking about geometry today
Yep.
in third grade.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, tell me where we are in the process.
Okay, so I gave an assessment and they didn't do very well on it. And so I'm kind of here where I'm kind of trying to figure out what to do because obviously they didn't learn it. I have about 70% of my kids that fell below 60% on the geometry assessment. And so I know that my kids, the majority of my class, didn't understand geometry.
So you're planning a whole class reteach?
Yes, whole class reteach.
All right, tell me about the targets for reteach.
Well, looking at my data, the TEKs that were tested were about 2 and 3 dimensional figures, and it seemed like my students were better at 3 dimensional figures than 2 dimensional figures. And so I really want to focus on 2D shapes. I want them to focus on recognizing like the quadrilaterals. They all miss like what's a rhombus and a parallelogram and a trapezoid. And so that's what I really want to focus on.
So talk to me about in the unit, when you taught the unit the first time, how did your team focus on building the vocabulary for that unit?
Well, we used pictures, we used exploragons, and really tried to make sure that we were using the vocabulary in our teaching, and we're showing the kids like models and pictures of it, and letting them explore with it.
What kind of experiences did the kids have using the words, and how were they responsible for expressing what they had learned?
They used some sentence stems, and they had some labels, but I'm not sure if like I held them accountable. Like I showed them the sentence stems and had them ask them to use them. They were put up, but I don't know if I was accountable to hold them accountable to the language once I had modeled it for them. And then they were asked to label on their like diagrams and things like that. And again, I'm not sure how accountable I held them to doing those things and using the language.
So is it fair to say that vocabulary would be a focus in reteach that might address sort of the scattered data?
Yeah, because during the test, like a lot of them were like, ask me to read or reread, or ask me like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And so it was a big red flag to me. So I think you're right that vocabulary was a definite area of concern.
Okay, so one thing that I noticed about the unit plan is the vocabulary words for focus. It was just the whole list for the whole unit with geometry and perimeter and area. It was all listed. So the first thing let's do for reteach is let's narrow that vocabulary down to some really specific words that you noticed that a lot of students were having trouble with, and we'll like highlight some words that you want to focus on in reteach.
I think angle would be one. An attribute, when we talked about that, a lot of my kids really struggled with what an attribute was, and I would have to give them a synonym for that. And let's see, what else? And some, like I said, the 2D shapes like hexagon and octagon, they like confuse, and so hexagon would be one. Rhombus was one that they struggle with. Sides as part of the attributes would be something that they would need to work on, and really the vertices of those shapes. So do you think that would be?
I think those are tricky words for them to know in third grade. Mm-hmm. Rhombus. I'm wondering about parallelogram. How did they do on?
That was when they really struggled with identifying like and classifying what was a parallelogram and what was not. So I don't think that was something they fully understood.
What about trapezoid? How are they on the trapezoids?
I had some do better on the trapezoids, but that was still a misconception, and several students, I think I had about 10 students that missed that question.
So that might help them if they're getting more familiar with the trapezoid. It might help them to compare like a trapezoid with a parallelogram to notice like the differences.
Okay.
It might be like a relative strength that you could build on if they know about trapezoids. So talk to me about your like your plan for the reteach to get them talking. What kinds of activities do you have planned for them to talk about these shapes, to write about these shapes, to describe them?
Well, so I think the sentence stems that we came up with as a team were really good. To have them, when they're speaking about the shapes, using the attributes to describe them, using, is it like a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional shape, saying how many sides it has. And so we came up with various sentence stems for that. I think where I need to do the reteaching is making sure they understand the sentence stems and then making sure that they are actually use them in conversation and when they respond. So if we're having a whole group conversation, make sure that I hold them accountable to use those sentence stems, not just showing it. And then making sure that they are a part of like creating our anchor charts and charts that we have labels on. And so kind of making them interactive charts where maybe like they could be Velcro or taped up there and they could move the labels around. And so they could actually be interacting with labeling the different shapes and attributes of those shapes.
I love the idea that you can use those things as practice and you also get some assessment data like along the way about those. I want to show you 2 things and they both come from Lead Forward. They're both just structures and they're not specific for geometry. They're really adaptable to anything. This one is specific for vocabulary. There's a reading one, but there is a specific one for math. It's called Rock and Roll Vocabulary. And there are like tasks for each roll of a die.
Okay.
And so like students would play together. This would be great to put, like you talked about exploragons. This is a great activity to use with exploragons. They could use the exploragons to provide an example or a non-example. A sketch, I would usually have like whiteboards available for them to do a quick sketch. And so if I'm playing this, like I might be playing it whole class and the kids are in partners, and so I flash up a word like rhombus. And so at their table, they would take turns rolling. I rolled a 3, and so I have to provide a non-example of a rhombus. And so I might choose an exploragon, or I might choose a marker and a whiteboard, and I would provide a non-example. And then I would have them play a few times. In 2, you can play in 4s, but I would have them go a few times so that for each word, they see an example, a non-example.
I like that.
Fun game. And adaptable to other things.
And once they know the structure, it seems like they could play it, like you said, it's adaptable with lots of things.
Absolutely, and lots of content too, not just math. The other one is pair, square, share. This is, it's from the movement and discourse section of Lead Forward. So they will get up, there will be a lot of conversation, a lot of opportunity for you to listen to what they're doing. It tells you the directions and I don't have to read them to you, but you would pose the question. It could even be an assessment item. This would be a great way for you to review the assessment that you already took. You would put up the item and then the student pairs would answer the question together. They would decide on an answer and then the pairs pair up. And so they form a square and then discuss, like compare their 2 answers.
Okay.
And so it gives them a lot of opportunities to hear other students thinking, and it gives them a lot of opportunity to reflect on their answer and think about if they want to change it, if they want to refine it. And then it gives you a lot of information as you're listening to them. Are they using the vocabulary that you want to hear? You can look for misconceptions. What do you still see that they aren't getting that you can go back and reteach?
Okay, yeah, I think both of those would help put some of the language back on them instead of me giving them all of the vocabulary. It would really, like that you said, like it would give them a chance to use the language, which I think is something that would really help them on the assessment.
All right, and then you guys have already written like an end of like reteach assessment. That...
Yes, but I think we can also make sure that we are focusing on the vocabulary we need to focus on, and make sure that we're really honed in on what kids miss and what we really need to reteach. And so even using this, I think we could go back and scaffold down what is in the assessment.
All right, well, let me know how I can help when you get started.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.